God has an amazing plan for men and women. All the way back in the Garden of Eden, God created men and women to be equal but different. And God has a plan for women in ministry. God has a plan for men in ministry. But there seems to be a void of men filling the role in ministry. This week on Behold the Savior, we're going to echo the call of God and invite men to be leaders that God has raised you up to be. Stay tuned this week on Behold the Savior. Well, hello and welcome to this week's episode of Behold the Savior. I'm going to tackle a big one this week, and it is calling mighty men for God. And whatever you think the sermon's about, you're probably wrong. Or maybe you're right, I don't know. But we're going to talk about calling mighty men to take the stand to follow God. I want to tell you about a young man by the name of Ben. This picture was taken at a camp meeting that was earlier this year, if you're watching this in 2018. The gentleman there on the right is Pastor Alex Doobie. He's a great man of God. I look up to him. He's a great mentor. And the little boy there, his name is Benjamin. Now, Benjamin at this camp meeting was reading his testimony. He's sitting on a chair there, not because of his health, but probably because of his nerves. He had an opportunity to read his testimony. Even at his young age, he had a powerful testimony for Jesus. You see, Ben, when he was in his mother's womb, the doctors saw that he only had half of a heart. And he was reading the story, and he was getting to the part where he said the doctors encouraged or gave the opportunity for the mother to have an abortion. You know, it would be easier. Whatever, I don't even know what goes through the mind of a doctor that tells someone to have an abortion, but whatever, the mother and father, because they believe in God, because they believe that God does not create accidentally, He does not accidentally create life, they said, no, we're going to see this through. God gave us this gift, and we're going to see this through no matter what. So Ben was born, half a heart, and you'd never know it to look at him. You need to be a little careful on the heat and overactivity, but for the most part, kid is healthy as a horse, and things are fantastic with him. So he's reading this testimony about how he's there today because of the faith of his mother and father, even in the light of what medical science told them couldn't or shouldn't be done. And you know, this young boy is going to grow up to be a man one day, and he's going to need good role models for what it's like to be a good, strong man of God. And unfortunately, television and entertainment does not provide all that good of examples of what men need to be or should be today. And there's a quote here from the book Education, page 57, paragraph 3. This is a very well-known quote in all areas of the world, many areas of the world. The greatest want of the world is want of men. Now, there's more to that quote, and I'll share that with you later on. The greatest want of the world is the want of men. Now, this tells me that people are looking for godly men of God to lead in a way that would actually glorify and honor God. Now, as we get into this message today, we need to understand that men and women are created equal, but are created different. Now, Adam was caused to go into a deep sleep, and God pulled a rib from his side and created Eve. Bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh. Why was Eve created from the rib of Adam? Why not the toe? Why not a hair? Why not whatever else? Eve was created from Adam because they were always to be connected. They were always to be together. From the rib and the side in the middle because neither one was supposed to be higher or lower than the other. They were supposed to be equal together. Created equal, but different. They are created equal in that neither one is superior or inferior, and that's the same that is true today, but created different. Eve would think differently. She would emote differently. Her body is different. And as much as guys may want to, we'll never be able to have a baby. We're just not designed that way. We don't have the plumbing for it. We're created equally, but different. We'll never know what it's like to have a life grow inside us, to feel it, and thankfully we'll never know what it's like to have a life come out of us either. I've seen 2 babies being born, and I don't want that. But what's the point here? We created equally, but different. Now, I want to give a disclaimer here. As we proceed through this message today, through this Bible study, this is not a Bible study on misogyny. This is not a Bible study or to prove that men are superior and that women need to bow down and do whatever they say. That's absolute nonsense. It's not true. But men and women have been created equally, but differently, with different roles to play in life. And you can see that even scientifically when it comes to church. I want to show you a powerful study that was taking place. This study is from the early 90s, so it's a bit dated, but I'm sure it's still relevant. And this was written in an article from 2003. This was done in Switzerland, I believe, and it was about church attendance. If both father and mother attend church regularly, 33% of their children will end up as regular churchgoers. So, statistically speaking, a mother, father, regular attenders at church, 33% of the time their children grow up to be regular church attenders also. Now, you may be thinking, 33%, a third, that's it, that's terrible odds. But actually, compared to what I'm going to show you, 33%, not too shabby. So 33%, with a mother and father attending church regularly, their children will attend church regularly. If the father is irregular and the mother is regular church attender, only 3% of the children will subsequently become regular themselves. Did you see the drastic drop? Now, when the father is out of the picture or only attends irregularly, it drops from 33% to 3%. The children will be regular church attenders. There's something about the influence of the father. There's something about a connection with the spiritual leadership, the spiritual priesthood in the family that God has designed in the household. Now, take a look at this. It continues. If the father is non-practicing and mother regular, only 2% of children will become regular worshipers. So if the father is not practicing or going to church at all, but the mother is, it goes down another percent, and 2% of the time the kids will be church attenders. But take a look at what happens here. If the father is regular, but the mother irregular, the percentage goes up from 33% to 38%. Now, that's not expected. It goes in the face of everything, and I still say, biblically speaking, the most effective thing is mother and father together, and that's the way God designed it. But it seems here, if the father is regular church attender and the mother is irregular, the statistics go up, and the psychology is that trust and faith following the father is actually increased when there's the lack of a mother. Now, I know what you're thinking, because I've heard this when I preached this sermon. Some of you women are thinking, oh, well, maybe I shouldn't go to church so my kids have a better chance of being in church. No. I think the best opportunity really is for the mother, the father to both go together, and the children. That's God's biblical example. So if the father is regular but the mother irregular, the percentage goes from 33% to 38%. Now watch this. And 44% with a non-practicing mother, as if loyalty to father's commitment grows in proportion to mother's laxity, indifference, or hostility. Whatever you would expect there, it's not what actually took place. There's something about the male leadership as priest of the family and household that God has designed it. We see it scientifically. God is calling men to lead as men. Now, there's this great exodus of people leaving the church. Every church, doesn't even matter the denomination. Many people are leaving churches of all denominations today, and it's like rats from a sinking ship. It's very, very sad. God is calling men back to Him. And we see the effects of the family. People are leaving churches. Families aren't getting better. They're getting worse. God's calling men back to church. And something that's interesting here, I know what's often thought is that there are more women attend church. And statistically, it's speaking, it's true. And I've been doing professional evangelism long enough to know that it seems like more women are more spiritually attuned to, to things of the Bible. But that's not what the Facebook and social media analytics show. And we have this media ministry called Behold the Savior. That's what you're watching right now. And all my statistics show that actually more men than women watch Behold the Savior. More women get engaged and comment and ask questions, but more men are seeking it and actually watching it. So what's there? I'm not a psychologist. My assumption is, it seems like that men like to be in better control. They like to pick and choose what they have access to. And so it seems like they like to choose who, what, when, where, why, and how of worship. So either way, the point is that don't believe this lie that men aren't interested in church or God anymore. It's not the case at all. They're searching. We just need to go out and find them and reel them in. Why? Because God is calling men back to Him. Where did the men go? Why do we not see male leadership in general, and particularly in church anymore? One reason may be because of this. This has become the male role model in leadership. Men are often depicted as bumbling idiots, in the cartoons and everything, and if they make it alive to the end of the show or movie, it's by a miracle. Usually the wife or the mothers are running the show, telling them what to do, and they're just kind of idiots just following along. That's laying a foundation for men to be not leaders as God has called men to lead anymore. Not only that, but it seems to be a great shift away from masculinity. Take a look at this. This is a picture from 3 different fashion shows, 3 different menswear spring fashion shows in Europe. Do you notice something a little bit off there? All of them are wearing women's clothing. And I will just have to say, I personally thank God that I don't see this very often. You do see a lot more femininity, if I can use that word, and generally in men today. And I'm not saying you have to grow a beard, drink beer, and go out and shoot things. I don't do any of that. But certainly we want to hold on to the masculinity. God has created us equally, but different. And if we leave this masculinity that God has led us to or is leading us to, then we're losing our control. I shouldn't say the word control. We're losing our opportunity to lead people to Jesus. And we're losing it in our children and our families. And that's a very dangerous place to go. Something has gone terribly wrong. God created to lead, not control, in the Garden of Eden. And actually, in the beginning, they were created equal. They were both created, neither one nor above the other. But at the fall of man, woman was made subject to man. Adam was called to lead. This was not God's original design, but it's his backup plan. Now, let's go back to the Garden of Eden with the fall of man. Who was it that was first tempted by Satan? It was Eve. But whose fault was it? Now, I'm not pointing all the finger at Eve. Adam should have been with his wife. Adam should not have let her out of his sight. They were designed to be together. She wandered off, and for whatever reason, he didn't follow. And then she ate from the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And then she invites her husband to do the same. Here's a problem. Did he have to? No, he didn't. He could have said no. He could have pleaded. He could have prayed. Would God have found some other way to provide salvation or some? And Adam knew in the day that they eat of it, they should die. They didn't drop over dead, but they began to die spiritually. Everything changed as a result of that. So Adam essentially chose to die with Eve rather than live with God. And so the whole, you can't just blame Eve on this. Adam is just as at fault. So God has created the male leadership as a result of this. Had Adam led the way from the beginning that he was supposed to, we wouldn't be in this mess today. We have some great Bible counsel. Ephesians 5:23, for the husband is head of the wife, as also Christ is head of the church, and he is the Savior of the body. Now, what does this mean? That does not mean, and I want to highlight this is not a license for abuse. This does not mean that the husband is supposed to dictate and manipulate every single thing that the wife is supposed to do. That's not the way that it works. What God has called is for the man to lead, not to dictate, but to lead. I think we're all healthy and responsible enough to understand that. And had this model been followed, we wouldn't be in the mess that we're in today. For the husband is the head of the wife, as also Christ is head of the church, and he is the Savior of the body. Why is it set up this way in the Bible? Because the family is a little picture of the church. Jesus is head of the church. You see us related many times throughout the Bible where the church is the bride and Jesus is the bridegroom. He's the head. So if the family is the same picture of that, then the man is supposed to be the priest or leader in the household, and they're supposed to work together under that sort of leadership. Now let's continue here to verse 24. Therefore, just as church is subject to Christ, so let the wives be to their own husbands in everything. So I do want to say this also. There have been women that have been forced into leadership positions in their house because the husband has been too lazy, doesn't care, or has been out of the picture, or to be fair, has died or, some other terrible thing like that. And I want to say, thank God for the women who have stood and risen to the occasion when they've had to. We give you honor and credit for that. But that's not God's ideal. And we see that because there's this great shift in the family dynamics, we see this great shift in church dynamics, and churches today are paying the price for this shift. So the family is a picture of the church. I want to share with you three Bible stories that we can learn from in the issue of leadership. Number one is Joseph. Joseph was given a coat of many colors, and this was sort of the father's way. He had a special relationship with his father, and essentially his brothers, Joseph's brothers, took this as dad loves you more than us, and that's not really fair. So there was this, things went from bad to worse. The brothers sold him into slavery, told the father that he was killed, and so he was taken into slavery. But through all of this, God was working in his life. When he was sold into slavery, he worked in Potiphar's house, and Potiphar was a great leader. Potiphar's wife put the moves on Joseph. Joseph had an opportunity to compromise his integrity. This is why I chose Joseph to highlight in his leadership. And there's a great wavering today in integrity. We need to stand on the morals that the Bible has given us. Joseph had an opportunity to commit adultery with Potiphar's wife, and he chose not to. He fled, and actually he fled away naked because the clothing was torn off of him. So because of this, then he was put, it looked like that he was doing things he shouldn't have been doing, even though he wasn't. So it looked like that, so then he was put in jail. While he was in jail for this period of time, God wasn't done with him. He was still using him. He used him to help people interpret dreams, and when he gets out of jail, now he rises to the top. So you may think that your life is not going as planned, and maybe that's true. Maybe it's not. But that doesn't mean God's not working through your life through this. God is certainly working through Joseph here. So he goes from slave to a leader. And if you've ever read the story of Joseph, which I highly recommend that you do, notice how often Joseph cries. I was in a Bible study group one time, and one of the ladies said, I never realized how big of a crybaby Joseph was. It's because of all that he went through, all the emotion. It was very sad. But through it all, he maintained his integrity and his relationship with God. God's looking for men that will hold on to their integrity and their scruples and their morality. And as a result of this, he rises as leader. Genesis 41:41, and Pharaoh said to Joseph, see, I have set you over all the land of Egypt. So he goes from being a slave to leading Egypt. Basically, he's the second in command. Pharaoh also said to Joseph, I am Pharaoh, and without your consent, no man may lift his hand or foot in all the land of Egypt. Not only that, but he's given a new name. And Pharaoh called Joseph's name Zaphnath-Paneah. And they're not really sure what this means. It might be Egyptian for God speaks and he lives. Anytime you see a change of name in the Bible, it denotes a change of character. And Joseph is going from being led to being a leader, from being a slave to being a leader because of his integrity and because of his conduct and faith in God. Now, with this great famine that took place in Egypt, God used Joseph to prepare Egypt for this famine that God told Joseph that was going to take place. Well, his brothers come in, they're looking for food, they're looking for resources, and Joseph is able to reunite with them. And long story short, there's a reunion there. And here we see Joseph's integrity still. The brothers apologize, and this is what Joseph says. He says, as for you, you meant evil against me. They sold him into slavery, told his dad that he was dead. He had to work as a slave. Then he was accused of something he didn't do. Then he was in jail. And all through that, listen to this. As for you, you meant evil against me through all that. But God meant it for good, in order to bring it about, as is this day, to save many people alive. Let's talk about our next person. Next person we want to talk about is Nehemiah. Nehemiah led in the third and final opportunity to rebuild Jerusalem after their Babylonian captivity. They had gotten themselves in captivity because they had apostatized or were disobeying God. God uses Nebuchadnezzar to destroy Jerusalem, take people out into captivity. Well, after 70 years of captivity, they come back now with resources and help and leadership of Nehemiah, and he leads them to rebuild the walls and city and temple. And really, it couldn't have been built in this time. It must have been God that was behind it. He rebuilt it in record time. So they figured, we got this mess in the first place because we didn't keep God's law. Now let's make some extra laws. So there were things that went from bad to worse, but they didn't learn their lesson. They went into captivity because they disobeyed God's law. And when Nehemiah comes out, he's extra careful to maintain God's law. God is looking for men with integrity, and God is also looking for people that will lead in keeping his law. Take a look at this. So it was at the gates of Jerusalem, as it began to be dark before the Sabbath, that I commanded the gates to be shut and charged that they must not be opened till after the Sabbath. And some people say, well, where does it say in the Bible you can't buy and sell on the Sabbath? The principle is there. Commandment number 4, we're supposed to rest, not buy or sell. And that means not making other people work. So he was very careful to obey all these laws. And he got a little bit, maybe a little bit overzealous on it also. And he even threatened them with violence. I'm not saying we should threaten with violence, but we need to take a stand with God's law. We should jealously guard the edges of the Sabbath. Remember that every moment is consecrated holy time. What I mean, guard the edges of the Sabbath. That means, as the sun is setting, we don't want to enter the Sabbath as, oh, well, I can't get everything done. I don't want the Sabbath to come. I got to get this done. You enter it with high blood pressure. It's not even fun. It's not even relaxing. If we enter it and plan for the Sabbath, God is calling for men that would lead God's people to maintain all of his commandments and his family with Sabbath keeping. And guard the edges of it. When the clock strikes, that moment when Sabbath is over, we don't have to run out and do everything and buy it. You can enjoy the time. Those dishes, they'll be there. Everything, it'll be there. Enjoy the time with God while you have it. Whenever it is possible, employers should give their workers the hours from Friday noon until the beginning of Sabbath. Give them time for preparation that they may welcome the Lord's day with quietness of mind. The way we enter the Sabbath has much to do with how we keep the Sabbath. By such a course you will suffer no loss even in temporal things. What are the temporal things? When we're obedient to God and we follow his law and keep his Sabbath, our family will be blessed also. Part of the Sabbath blessing is the union and reunion of our family. It's a promise from God. Now we see here in Nehemiah 13:19, Nehemiah was trying to keep things under control with the Sabbath, the buying and selling at the gates of the city of Jerusalem, at the temple. Then I posted some of my servants at the gates so that no burdens would be brought in on the Sabbath day. Then I warned them and said to them, why do you spend the night around the wall? They were waiting. They couldn't wait to just go do their buying and selling and make money. If you do so again, I will lay hands on you. From that time on, they came no more on the Sabbath. Again, obviously, I'm not saying that we need to threaten people to keep the Sabbath. That's not what I'm saying. But he at least had the courage, and he was willing to stand for what he knew was right. Now, the third person that I want to share with you is not a man, and it's not how he led his family, but it's about a woman, how she encouraged leadership in the family. Sarai. Now, obviously, Sarai, who became Sarah, this is Abraham's wife, made some bad decisions. There's no question about that. God uses imperfect people, that's true. But Abraham, when he was 75 years old, he was called to go. He was called to go to a land. Where am I supposed to go, God? You just go, I'll tell you when you get there. So she trusted and allowed her husband to lead. And ladies, there are times when ladies need to allow their husbands to lead. Don't always have to be right. And men, don't be afraid to take the lead. Next time the ladies say, hey, where should we go to eat? Actually say where you should go to eat. Don't just say, I don't know, where do you want to go? Lead gently. Don't dictate, don't abuse. Lead the way that God has called you to lead. So we see that in Ephesians 5:22, wives, submit to your own husbands as to the Lord. Ephesians 5:25, here's the key here. It's not about oppression. Husbands, love your wives, just as Christ also loved the church and gave himself for her. Now, the thing is, when we lead as God has called us to lead, we go where God has called us to go. We need to stand. We need to take positions in church. There's been such a void of men taking leadership in church that's being filled with, and again, I'm thankful where ladies have risen where they need to, but that's not God's ideal. The greatest want of the world is the want of men. Men who will not be bought or sold. Men who in their inmost souls are true and honest. Men who do not fear to call sin by its right name. Men whose conscience is as true to duty as the needle to the pole. Men who will stand for the right though the heavens fall. We need people who will stand no matter what. Not that one would rule over the other, but that they would lead together the way God has planned it. Does this mean the woman should keep silent in church and not teach, not lead out in anything? Some of the most effective workers in the church are the ladies. I want to highlight that, and we're thankful for it. Don't forget to like and share what you're learning on social media. Visit and like us on Facebook. Visit and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Visit and subscribe to the website at beholdthesavior.com. Thank you, and God bless.